Sorry, I keep thinking I'm muting it.
Okay,
Something messing with my computer.
welcome to our city council meeting this evening on this snowy January 9th of 2004. We appreciate you taking the time to join with us this evening. We'll start tonight by asking Councilmember Barker if he would like to offer an invocation or thought, discretion, and then lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Sure, I'll offer an invocation. Our dear Heavenly Father, we're grateful that we can meet this evening as the North Ogden City Council and North Ogden City residents. We're grateful for the opportunity to discuss affairs of our city. Please bless that we'll be led by Thy Spirit and that we can make wise decisions, and bless us that we'll have a good, enjoyable evening. These things we stand in Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Barker. Moving to our consent agenda this evening. Council, have you had a chance to look at the agenda? And if so, is there any conflict of interest you'd like to disclose at this time? I see none. We'll go into item number 2 on our consent agenda. This is an appointment, an official appointment to the Mosquito Abatement Board. As the mayor, I've been asked to appoint a member, serve on that. Councilmember Barker has been our representative there for some period of time. And so I would recommend to the council that he continue that assignment. So with that, I would look for a motion to approve his appointment to the Mosquito Abatement Board.
Mayor, I move that we approve Councilman Barker as a member of the Mosquito Abatement Board.
Thank you. Councilmember Severin. Do I have a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Councilmember Watson. Is there any further discussion on that? Would you like Councilmember Barker to explain how mosquitoes fly or anything of that nature?
Nope.
Okay, looks like no discussion on that. I'll have a motion and a second. I use a roll call vote for this. Tonight we'll start with Councilmember Severin and go to his right and come back to Councilmember Pulver and end up with Councilmember Barker. Councilmember Severin.
Yes.
Councilmember Watson.
Yes.
Councilmember Dowpaz.
Yes.
Councilmember Pulver.
Yes.
Councilmember Barker.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. We'll now enter into our active agenda. And John, also if you would watch online, we have people attending online if they'd like to make a public comment. And so I would, at this point in time, ask those who would like to make a comment that are here, step up to the podium, state your name, if you're a resident of North Ogden. And I would ask that you limit your comments to no longer than 5 minutes and that you keep those professional to address your issue. So anyone who would like to make a comment this evening is more than welcome to step up to the podium at this point.
Council Philip Swanson, North Ogden resident. Regarding item number 4 on tonight's agenda, the winter parking restrictions, I'd ask you to remember that the parking restrictions are in place for the safety and well-being of the community at large. And when we make a variance for an individual, whether that be a family or a business, we have to ask ourselves, I think, whether or not we are improving or reducing safety in that particular area. The road that runs by Big O, and I love Big O, they know how many tires I buy. These guys know me very well. I spend a lot of money over at Big O. But allowing a variance in this case, I believe, opens a can of worms for variances for anybody else throughout the city. If I have a large family and I have 3 or 4 teenagers each driving a car, my wife drives a car, the husband drives a car, and we have don't have enough space on our driveway and in our garage. What's the difference between a business that then wants to occupy a street during winter restrictions? For me, it's a safety issue. It's a very busy street there, coming in and out of there, a lot of traffic coming in and out. And we need to keep that road safe. And then one other issue for your consideration at a future date is again, the semi parking that's happening over on 300 East that Jim Urey brought up a number of weeks ago. That's continuing to happen, and they seem to be proliferating. At times 4 and 5 semis parked over there. And it's a public street. It's not a commercial parking zone. Thanks.
Hello, council. I'm Jason Westbrook. I am the owner of Big O. Just a rebuttal to that, where you're talking about families having their vehicles out on the street. That is something to where they are not looking and monitoring things that are going on out there. We have cameras dedicated to there. We have employees checking. In the 23 years that we've been parking out there on 1900, I can count on one hand how many times a plow has came down that road during the day. We're not asking for nighttime parking. We're just asking for daytime between 6:30 to 6:30, between 7 to 6, right in that range. And it's going to be something to where we can see if there's anything going on to where we need to move for that. You know, a resident, they're not going to see what's going on outside. They're not gonna know. I mean, we have a neighbor just to the north of me. I live in North Ogden also. And he's had his truck out on the streets this whole time. It's plowed in. You know, people like that, they're not seeing that. They're leaving it out there overnight. We're not leaving it out there overnight. And for the most part, when the plows come down, they're coming it down at the middle of the night. I'm asking on this just for your consideration on that. I just wanted to bring that up because that is a thing. We're monitoring that during the day. We see it during the day. We're not leaving them out overnight to where they can't be cleared overnight. Thank you for your time.
Council members, my name is Dave Shoup. I live in Liberty, Utah, but I own a business here in North Ogden, Coldwater Animal Hospital. Recently it's come to my attention that, well, you sent an officer over to my facility that apparently there was a complaint that I hadn't shoveled the walk, the new sidewalk that exists along Washington Boulevard. And it was a problem for the safety of the kids that go to and from school. So I remedied it and I plowed that walk, and then I also plowed along Pleasant View Drive, the sidewalk that North Ogden City recently installed, and maintained that all the way over to the end of the new parking that we just purchased. My worry or concern is that the sidewalk was installed by North Ogden City, but now North Ogden City is requiring me to maintain a walkway there for not just the kids, but really for the public. My property ends at the grass. That's where my property ends. You put the sidewalk in, and so my feeling is that if North Ogden City put it in, North Ogden City ought to maintain it. Prior to the sidewalk being there, there was no reason, no one ever, in the 20+ years that I've been a vet, made me plow or keep a walkway open on my lawn or my grass to allow the kids to and from school. If it's really a safety issue, I read the code, North Ogden's code, and it says something about an abutment. If my property abuts a public walkway, then I'm responsible. Well, the rules have changed. I'm 60 years old. I didn't used to do this. Now you're requiring of it. My feeling is if you're going to require it of my time, then I'm going to charge you. You have to pay me for my time. I don't just give that away. My time is valuable to me. If you are still going to require me to do it, well, then let's use North Ogden City's equipment because it's North Ogden City's walkway. North Ogden, buy me a snowblower, buy a snowblower, have it at the city shops, then I can come and snow blow, have sand or salt that I can put on the sidewalk. I also have a question about liability, and maybe this addresses John Call, but if some kiddo slips and falls on that sidewalk and breaks an arm, am I liable? Because now you're requiring me to clean the walk, but if it's not the standard or someone slips and falls, who's liable? Is that me or is that North Ogden City? So ways that I've come up with solutions for this is, one, you deed the property to me. If that sidewalk is really indeed my responsibility to take care of, and it's my property, then deed it over. Put it on property parcel number 181710001. Give it to me, our argument's over. I'll take care of it. Third option, we talked about buying a snow blower and having you guys do it. I don't really think it's my job or my responsibility to use my equipment. What the plow pushes over onto that sidewalk, because it's right next to the road, is gonna be icy and chunky. How long is my snow blower gonna last blowing the ice chunks that the plows, North Ogden City plows onto that sidewalk? Is my time up? I don't know. Really, I think your sidewalk, you deal with it, you fix it, you take care of it. Don't make me do your job. And don't change the rules in the middle of the game. No, it didn't used to be that I had to do anything. And now you're requiring me to do this, or I face fines. Doesn't make sense to me. And if this is a bigger agenda item than what just public comments will allow, then maybe I need some direction from Ryan on how to put it on the agenda so I can take more time to discuss this with you. But I've asked, I guess maybe, I don't know how to really phrase my question. What do you guys think? What is it, your sidewalk? Is it my sidewalk? Who's responsible to maintain it? And why did the rules change?
Mr. Shoup, if you've attended our meetings, I've asked the council not to respond until public comments at the end of the meeting. So if you'd like to stick around, you're welcome to, or you can look at the recording and that's when we'll respond to your question.
All right,
Okay,
thanks.
thank you.
I'm Kevin Burns from North Ogden City. I am here tonight to speak to item number 4, the parking ordinance change. First of all, I would be a no vote. I'm opposed to that change for a number of the same types of reasons that Phil Swanson spoke to. But I would like to add, if you're going to approve it, if you're going to come up with something to be business friendly, and I get that part of it as well. I'd like to see something in place that the owner, the business owner, whichever business owner it happens to be in the city somewhere, and the city comes to an agreement that if they're gonna be allowed to park and prohibit or at least hinder the plowing, that they enter into some type of agreement to hold the city harmless, should an accident occur of some kind, and let them work that out with their insurance. Something to look at. It's very, the new ordinance, as I read it, it specifies employee parking. Very difficult to distinguish between employees and customers. Probably not something we should worry about having our police officers do as they worry about citations and stuff. So if you're gonna do it, just do it, and don't make our officers do that. I will use the example of Big O since that's who brought it up. And that is parking, having vehicles, and this is daytime parking for plowing, not that common. It's a handful of times, like the man said, but maybe we put it in the ordinance that they park on, say, the north side of 1900 West, and with some coordination, the eastbound lane can be plowed, and then those employees can go move their cars so that the other side of the road can be plowed. They would coordinate, like you'd have a half hour or 45 minutes and get your folks moved because they're watching it on the cameras, right? They're paying attention to it during the day, so they know they can go out and move their cars and open it up. Maybe that would be helpful. And again, with the safety, even this cold time of year, We have plenty of people that are out walking and cycling and still doing those things that use that street. And as the snowbanks encroach on the lanes, it gets more and more dangerous. And just like to throw some suggestions out there to help if we can come to a happy medium with the folks. So thank you very much.
Burns? Anyone else like to comment this evening? Don, is there anyone online?
No raised hands.
Anyone else this evening? All right, we appreciate your comments. Always welcome to give us input. Make sure we're considering things that are important to the city in its entirety. We'll move on then to item number 4. And we're going to ask our Community and Economic Development Director, Mr. Hess, to address ordinance 2024-01, which would have a potential to amend city code title 7-3-4, which would update the winter commercial parking. Scott?
Okay, thank you, Mayor and Council. Just want to start off that this is a little bit different because we have 2 city codes. We have the city code and the land use code. City code going directly to the city council for these legislative decision-making processes. There's no planning commission side or land use side and public hearing notice. It's just a little bit different process. And that being said, we don't have a formal application for when the residents ask for this. So the staff in this case was helpful in helping draft some language that would cure a problem. And I think that's the way the council should look at the ordinance in front of you today, as opposed to something coming up through planning commission with a recommendation to the council. It's really just kind of a placeholder ordinance, or this would solve this particular issue as it's been asked by a resident or business owner in the city. So I'm happy to field any questions. John Call and myself went back and forth on what we thought to be kind of a reasonable middle ground of a free-for-all of parking during a winter storm versus, you know, isolating it to within a certain distance. There have been other topics that have been brought up since this time. We have driveways on 1900 North, that maybe there's a limited distance to a driveway, and the property just north of Big O that's currently vacant has an application to be developed that's been submitted now that will have another driveway in close proximity to the intersection of 1900 North and Washington that may further limit some of those cars to be able to park on the north side. So there's a number of things to consider in this one. We're happy to answer questions. And of course, as you heard in the public comments, the business owner is here who has requested this change to Title VII, and would, you know, welcome the council to ask further clarifying questions too of the business owner that this would cure the issue.
Thank you, Scott. While Scott's there, council, do we have any questions? Councilmember Bowler?
Well, I can't remember if it was city council or planning commission that we had talked about something about this, that originally the parking lot that they had was kind of limited because of, I think it was setbacks and or amount of trees they had to have or something like that. Is there a deviation that we can do on that to add more parking to their parking lot so we can get them, I know 100% get them off the street, but is there a long-term thing, at least for Big O, that we can, you know, kind of not have all this stuff? Yeah.
So I sat down with the business owner and looked at his original site plan, and it did have some parking, is it 8 or 9 stalls?
Yeah.
That would kind of nose out towards Washington Boulevard. So there's a landscaping buffer out there between the back of the sidewalk and their current parking lot. And we have held that consistent. If you look at Google Maps, it's probably your best option there, and it goes this little landscaping buffer as you scroll out and you go north, even north or south. The city's been really consistent in applying that. So if we were to allow some parking to edge into that area behind the sidewalk and where their current parking is, which is what those 9 stalls were originally contemplated in, that would be a change to the entirety of Washington Boulevard and its setbacks for commercial businesses. And we've held Kroger and Walgreens and Maverick and several other small locally owned businesses to that same setback. So there's a cure there, but it would be an application from an applicant to change the setbacks along that major street. It would go through public hearing, planning commission, and ultimately to the city council. That would be a long-term fix, or at least a small long-term fix for this project itself. you know, the hard part is that they just do a really good business. They've just outgrown their site and outgrown what the franchises for a Big O, as I understand, would permit today versus when they first built, which is a benefit for the city. We have a wonderful, you know, highly functional operating business in the city. But it's ultimately just undersized. They've grown past their, you know, they're kind of bursting out.
Any other questions for Mr. Hess? Councilmember Barker?
I like Mr. Burns' idea. Is it worth addressing to hold the city harmless if a plow hit their or cause damage? I don't know what the business owners think about that.
Like I said, I was only,
No, we can't have you speak.
Oh, sorry.
from the-
I thought that was a question too.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I thought that was a
No
question.
problem, no problem. We'll have some more comments at the end, just trying to keep a little order there. We had a conversation, just maybe I could, prior to this, we had a little bit of meeting to see what is on the agenda and talk about it. And some of the things we talked about, because I think there's been some good comments made here. But if the council wanted to look at something, not a variance, but actually a change in the ordinance is what it would be, is that there'd have to be restrictions on parking back from the intersection, because I think it was mentioned that right now people are having to kind of edge out to Washington Boulevard. So there probably, if the council wants to consider this, there have to be some restrictions. And some of the things we talked about were, you know, parking back in the intersection, X number of feet as a restriction, parking back from driveways, X amount of feet, that they could only be parking on one side of the street, instead of both, that there would have to be a hold harmless agreement in regards to the plows. If the plows, you know, inadvertently hit those cars, that would have to be an obligation of the business. And there'd probably have to be some other structure in that, because otherwise you just open it up. I think the sentiment was we'd like to accommodate our business districts and help them, but on the other hand, we have to keep the city safe, as I think was previously mentioned. So if the council, you know, wants to consider a change in the ordinance, I agree that some restrictions would have to be placed in there so that it doesn't become the wild, wild west, so to speak. So those are some of the things that were kind of battered back and forth. In the meeting, you may have some other comments, but just so you know what's been discussed, so we didn't regurgitate again, so. Councilmember Pulver, did you have another question?
Just a thought. I think that, I mean, we're talking about changing the ordinance, and I was just thinking about it, the fact that, you know, really it comes down to enforcement of a lot of the things that we have all over the place. I mean, just some of the sidewalks in my neighborhood aren't cleared. So, I mean, the key thing is maybe not change the ordinance. Because the snowplow, I was talking to the snowplow drivers just the other day, and if there's issues, they take pictures of it, they report it. And so I guess that might be the issue, is that if there is an issue, the snowplows, you know, really what's the intent of the ordinance is to plow the streets. So if there is an issue, it can be remedied fairly quickly, I would think, with the business owner right there during the day, open hours, that they can fix it. So I don't know if we would even need to make a change to the ordinance. You know, it comes down to enforcement, and who really the intent of is to make sure the plows get through safely.
Anyone else have a comment? Councilmember Delpas?
There were some good suggestions on this from residents and everyone involved. One question is, I know you can't time a storm. That's the most difficult thing about these snowstorms. You never can time it perfectly. But if there is an overnight storm, I'm wondering if we can send the plows to 1900 as one of the first ones. So at 5:30 or 6 a.m., I know that's difficult because of timing, but on the route, have that be the first one. So when the employees arrive, it's done, and then you don't have to worry about going around them. So just a thought.
Thank you. Any other questions for Scott or Councilmember Watson?
So would it be possible, Scott, to add something, or Mayor, to add something on this ordinance that requires the business owner to monitor it a certain amount of times a day or every couple of hours, would that be something that we could even enforce?
I think the business owner had a good suggestion there that they're monitoring that. It might fit into Councilmember Polder's question here, if they're willing to monitor that and somehow get those off the street. I know we can't say exactly, I know Dave's here, but when the plow will come through, but I mean, if there was some type of communication that could take place between 6:30 and 6:30, with the plow driver knowing, hey, I'm on my way, get those cars out of the way, and you could move it. Potentially is an answer, but I believe the sentiment I'm hearing here is we'd like to accommodate and help be business friendly. I think it's a little bit more complicated than originally thought, but let me just ask the council this. Is this something you'd like to consider further? Because I think if it is, it might be postponing it might be the answer until we can come up with some other solutions, because I think as it's written now, and I compliment Scott, he did the best job he could as in trying to help the business owner. Is this something you want to further consider? If so, I would say we probably postpone this until we can get some of these things resolved. But in the meantime, if we could figure somehow how to coordinate with the business so that we accomplish the plowing of the street as Councilmember Pulver talked about, at least help in that regard. Councilmember Watson, you're.
Yes, I live pretty close to this particular location, and I come out of that entrance very frequently. And just yesterday, I just wanted to point out that I noticed employees at Big O Tires on an ATV with a plow, being very meticulous about keeping it clean, and the sidewalks included. There's only a sidewalk on the south side of that intersection, and so I don't know if that plays a part into whatever is decided, but it seemed to be pretty safe when I was driving by, even with the cars on the sides. But the only other question that I had is if there was a way to, I liked the idea that was proposed that only employees can park there. If I had dropped my car off as a customer, I wouldn't want it to be inches away from the plow. And so I don't know if there's a way that we could implement that, like some sticker permits or something that go to the employees. If there was a way that we could help encourage that idea of only having the employees on the road. That was my other thought.
That's a good point. I think we've got to be careful not to put additional enforcement on our officers. I think if the council wants to consider that, it'd have to be conditional on the owners of the business complying with that. And if they were found to be out of compliance, because you can kind of tell what's happened, then the agreement would become void. But let me just in time's frame here, would you like to discuss this matter further? Another council meeting? If so, I would look for a motion to postpone this until we can further discuss it. Councilmember Delpas.
I'd like to discuss it further because I feel like there has to be a solution that can be good for both sides. So I move that we postpone this item to a date down the road, whether that's a couple of weeks or a month from now.
Can we have a motion to postpone this item? Councilmember Severing.
Well, I was just gonna, if I can just make this comment before we actually go that direction. I think there is a time is of the essence for them. So I would say if we're gonna postpone this, we need to probably bring it up as soon as we can.
I don't know if Councilmember Delpas would like to amend his motion to put a time frame on it. Or
When's our next meeting? 20 something?
We're technically meeting next week, but the 23rd is the next active meeting.
postpone it till the 23rd.
So I amend my motion to bring this back up on the January 23rd meeting, as long as staff thinks we can get towards that.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second to Councilmember Delpaz's motion.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Barker. Is there any further discussion? The motion is to postpone this item to the January 23rd meeting. Councilmember Watson?
I was just wondering what happens between now and then if there's a storm.
Yep. That's a good point. I think at this point in time, I think there's a reasonable solution, and if the owner is willing to comply with that, because I think I like to look at the substance of things, and getting the street plowed is the substance. So if they're willing to commit to having those cars moved, when the plow comes down, I think we could try to accommodate that for a short period of time. Because frankly, I think our officers, if the street was plowed and somebody parked on that street and it wasn't plowed, they wouldn't probably be out hunting that. Unless it was incurring safety and plowing. Most likely, I don't want to speak for the police department, they can do what they want. That would be something that might be worth considering. So I don't think we can tell them what to do and what not to do, but that's a potential solution to avoid probably citations if they're not on the street when the plow comes by. Okay. So we do have a motion to postpone, and we do have a second. All in favor of postponing this to the January 23rd meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion to postpone passes unanimously. We move on to item number 5. And this is a discussion or action to consider resolution 01-2024, which would be an update on the city council rules and procedures. I know that Mr. Call sent this out to all the council members, asked them to take a look at it, that he received numerous comments, including mine. So Mr. Call, why don't we go ahead and have you present?
Oh, okay, thank you, Mayor. So council, I've taken all of the comments I got in the email or via email and just kind of inputted them into the document so we can just walk through them one at a time and just see the feedback. I'll probably skip over some of the grammar changes. Councilmember Pulver added a few commas and stuff in places that seemed appropriate. And so we've just said, great. But we'll just jump down through here. Let me.
Why don't you review the substantive changes, John?
So yeah, one comment was the idea that with the completion of the new public safety building and the larger gathering room, we were planning on moving council to that space. And so we should change where the meetings will be held to a different identifier as opposed to City Hall. So I'll go through these, and if there's a objection or a question, throw something at me. The next one was a discussion about emergency meetings. And the question came up of what's the difference between this and a special meeting. So a special meeting, we typically require the signature of 2 council members. And so I went into the state code to see how it compared to this for emergency. And what it actually requires is that the council vote, essentially. Ryan would take a poll of the council members just to make sure a majority of the people wanted to have an emergency meeting, and then schedule the meeting. So that's the way I've rewritten it, is that any council member could say, I think we need to have an emergency meeting. Ryan would then ask the council members if they felt it was okay and when worked. And then if a majority of the council members said, yes, go ahead, then we would schedule it. If the majority of council members said no, then we wouldn't schedule it, and we would proceed with those items at the next meeting. We still would probably follow a similar process where we'd want to get signatures on a document saying these are the council members that approved the meeting, just for procedural purposes. We would, just so that the paperwork was there so residents could see how it happened. But this is to align with state code. In fact, I changed the state code reference to reference emergency meetings as opposed to the special meetings. So the next one was down here talking about the mayor's striking of the gavel. So we have several spots in the procedures where it says the mayor strikes the gavel, and we just as a matter of procedure haven't been doing that, haven't required that. And so the question is, how often do you want to require the mayor to strike the gavel?
That's my favorite part of the meeting.
Well, we still do have it. It still is in here in the beginning and the end. But the question is, do we want to require it for public hearings or other similar activities? And it's the way, so I haven't taken it out, but if the council would like, we can take this out. As far as the official striking of the gavel. And thoughts on that one, because I'd need to amend the language if we're gonna pull it out.
It sounds like the mayor likes doing that, but let's maybe just take it out. It seems unnecessary for the public hearings,
Okay,
as long as there's not any major problems with that.
so I'll just take it out, and so it just essentially says the mayor will declare the public meeting closed.
I think, John, the mayor can use the gavel at anytime. I mean, you call the meeting to order if it's out. I mean, frankly, it doesn't have to define when the mayor uses the gavel.
Yeah.
So I think it's fine to take it out.
Okay. Do we need to put the mayor should only use the gavel on the desk as opposed to?
No, it could be used for other purposes.
Let's see, this was a question. So several cities and organizations, if you abstain, we're supposed to say, and the state code requires us to say what an abstention means. In the past, we've chosen to say it doesn't mean anything. It counts as if the individual was not here for the discussion. And some cities say an abstention is a yes vote, and some cities say an abstention is a no vote. And so those are the three options. And so the question is, do we want to leave it as generic, or do we want it to be a no vote? The reason it can come into play is if all five are present, one of you abstains, then in the voting for the motion, there'd be one, or there wouldn't be, we treat it like there was four, and there could in theory be a tie that the mayor would then break. If it was a yes or a no, then that would be logged in as a vote. So if you abstained, then it would count as a no vote, which means two more no votes, and that would carry the motion, as opposed to, or the same thing with a yes vote. So it's totally up to the council which way you'd like it to go.
Councilmember Watson?
So are you saying we can't keep it how it is, but it's not counted as a yes or no?
You can keep it how it is. It can cause problems. I think once we've had an issue, in fact, we rewrote it several years ago because it used to be a no. And it caused some issues, I think, because we had two council members abstaining. And it caused it basically made it so there wasn't a majority of the council that could vote on it. But that was one kind of fluky scenario.
And because you can declare a conflict and you don't have to abstain from voting. State law says that, you state your conflict, but it doesn't prevent you from voting. So it becomes so anybody could abstain from voting from any reason they want, just because they didn't want to address the issue, not that they have a conflict. And, somebody once said, I think it was Terry Bexel, told me, council members are elected to do simply a couple things, and one of them is to vote yes or no. So, the issue on that is that anybody could abstain without having a conflict, just to say, I want to abstain from voting. So the question is, does that then, are they fulfilling the duty for which they were elected? I'm just saying this, I don't think we're gonna come to a conclusion on all these things tonight. Because I think there's some further questions, perhaps we will, but I'm just throwing out think through your consideration and why you may or may not want to change that.
So give.
Give us some time to think about it. Move on to the next one, John.
Okay.
Yeah.
And part of the reason why I'm not sure if the council's ready to do this tonight is that one thing that we didn't really, the council hasn't talked about a group is the very last item. So it's a little preview teaser, you might call it. The idea that we might want to talk about social media and how the city officially responds to social media, direct messages, things like that. So, but we will get to that. This was some, in 20 under Rule 4, this had been cut off in a previous version and added in and then got cut off again. And so essentially what this came out, we had a bomb threat one night here in council meeting. And so this gives the mayor the authority to essentially, if there's an issue, call the meeting to close immediately based on the mayor's feelings of the best way to handle the situation. But what's in red was just left off of the last version. But the idea is that the mayor's job is to deal with safety more than the strict procedures of the Open Meeting Act.
And speaking of that, John, as I was reviewing this and giving my comments, we talked about the sergeant at arms. And I just want to clarify who that is in the event we ever have to do that, because the sergeant at arms, the mayor calls upon that individual to escort people out of the meeting who are disruptive or causing issues in the council. That's why we have Officer Lopez here. He's our great sergeant at arms tonight. And just so people understand why he's here and what his duties include, so.
Yeah, and that we did address that later on.
Later on, I might forget.
Yeah, but it's so we'll hit that again too. But that essentially we're in the language we're changing to say any North Ogden police officer is a sergeant at arms should the mayor call on them. But we will see that again. This one was mentioned in the email. The idea that maybe recordings of the meetings should not be a complete and unedited record, depending on if there's something said or maybe something inappropriate shared. The state code is the one that designates that recordings are unedited, and so that doesn't apply to the videos because that's not the official recording. It's the recording that Ryan does with the recorders. So those remain unedited and are posted on the city website immediately after. But technically the YouTube ones, we haven't officially edited any of them yet because we just haven't. But in theory, if there was something going on, a good example is if someone streaked across the video, we could take that off without violating the Open Meetings Act. So let's see, down to the next one. This was some clarification, I think came from Councilman Dalpaz, essentially referencing that during public comments, we don't immediately respond. It gives the council staff some time to think, but still leaves it open that the mayor could immediately respond to a question if appropriate.
Just so you know, when I usually immediately respond, that's if someone is personally attacking someone in this room, and I will respond immediately to that. Because that's something I will not tolerate.
And my suggestion for that was mostly just to keep the meeting a little better in order. Just rare circumstances, it's turned into a Q&A format for public comments. So I just think it will make that a little more clear.
And I did have a conversation with Councilmember Dalpez. Excuse me about this. You remember we've had several instances where there was an inconvenience to the citizen who wanted to comment. And they said up front, hey, I've got to be out of here by this time, I've got a commitment. And we did respond at that point in time. So I think this language does give leeway mayor's judgment to do that, I believe. Is that what we concluded? Councilmember Delpez?
Yes.
The next one is the adjournment. As we've been doing in practice, we don't require an official vote to adjourn. Essentially, we call it a non-debatable motion, and the mayor strikes the gavel and off we go. So we're just clarifying this to align with that procedure. I didn't see anything in the state code that required us to vote on an adjournment.
I think Bob's rules say you don't have to.
Bob's rules, yep.
Councilmember Delpez? I
Oh,
mean,
I-
Councilmember Barker, I'll go with you first, 'cause I think you had your hand up first.
So before we go too far, I thought we were gonna talk back up in public comments on time limits.
And there was a change in there proposed from 5 minutes to 3 minutes.
Yep.
Let's see.
The version I saw.
I think you just passed it.
Okay.
I'm not proposing that it goes to 3. I'm just saying that on the version I had, that I saw had 3 in it. Well, Councilmember Barker?
I would make the proposal that we change it to 3. We're giving multiple times in a meeting for public comments. A lot of cities only give 1 time for public comments. We're giving before and after and during. So that's my proposals. If we're gonna have multiple times for public comments, we do it 3. If we're gonna do 5, then it's either at the first or at the end.
Councilmember Watson?
Does this limit also include if there were a public hearing comments for that?
No. So I think public hearings are more open, aren't they, John? Public comments.
So a good example is when we've done our tax hearings, we typically have limited them to 3 minutes. But in some of the other public hearings on land use items, we haven't. So it does leave a little bit of room for that. But again, because we're not necessarily specifically talking about that tonight or approving this tonight, we could go to the area on public hearings and specify a time, or we could say, that the mayor is allowed to be the judge of, if we're staying on topic. Although I would say probably it can put the mayor in an awkward position if there isn't a time limit. So we usually kind of recommend people stick to whatever's in the code or in the policy for public comments in general.
Okay, now, Councilmember Delpez, your comments.
So I kind of wanted to stick with 5 minutes, just with the thought of the last couple of years that I've been on the council, I haven't seen or experienced much of a problem with that time limit. I think where it sometimes becomes problematic from an efficiency perspective is when we have a packed house. So every once in a while, we get a really big agenda item. And so I would suggest we keep it at 5 minutes, but if the mayor sees fit at the beginning of a particular meeting, because it's completely full and we will be here until midnight if we don't, then you can make the call, and at the beginning of the meeting, you say, by the way, I'm going to keep comments to 3 minutes in this meeting. Just a thought.
Another way to do that too, Councilmember Delpez, would to encourage, as you know, sometimes when we've had a packed house, the comments are the same, right? And
Yeah.
so the mayor is willing to be very courteous and say, this is an issue we've already addressed. We could limit it that way.
Yeah.
Also, but anyway, something that is to consider, 5 minutes or 3 minutes, since we're not doing it tonight, so you can digest that.
Let me make one more quick comment.
Of course, Councilmember
So-
Barker, go ahead.
When I first got put on the council, we actually changed it from 5 minutes to 3 minutes, and I thought it went well until a citizen actually brought up that on the back of our paper, it says 5 minutes. Well, if you look at your paper tonight, what does it say? 3 minutes. So that's why we can't have, that's why I think it has to be a set number.
Well, I think another thing that you could consider is that we could set the time on each meeting with a maximum of 5 minutes, but if the agenda is 3 minutes, then that's what we allow. We could set that based upon the items on discussion. Just another potential solution for you to consider. Councilmember Watson, I presume.
I agree that sometimes it's hard to even stick to the 5 minutes in my experience. Maybe it should have been more 3, but I also am concerned if there was a topic that brought a lot of community members out, I would be concerned if we were discouraging those who don't usually come, let's say, to not comment because their comment had already been said. I would hope that everyone feels welcome to participate. And maybe we could word it some way like, I agree with the first comment or so-and-so's comment, encourage that. But I would hope that we could, if someone had made the effort to come out to show their voice and then make the numbers be seen, that they could all feel like they could at least be allowed to stand up at the microphone.
Yeah, I think that would be the case. I don't think that would impair that. So just a clarification, we would allow it, anyone who wants to stand up. But I think as a courtesy, we may remind them, this is kind of the same issues that have been addressed for the last 15 minutes. All right, John, what's next?
Let's see, that was the non-debatable motion. So here's the sergeant at arms. And so it just says, any North Ogden police officer shall be considered a sergeant at arms if called upon. So, and then there's nothing until we get down to what was in the staff report about the media policy. And so I'll just pull that up right now because that's really easy to read. And the idea being that this was a policy that was written and put together back in 2014, 2015. It ultimately died because one of the council members said they didn't like the way it was written. And so we have adopted several of these items internally between the mayor and the public information officer that we still follow, but we don't follow all of them. And so the question is, do we want to institute a more formal policy? And then specifically on social media, we have several individuals who are allowed to respond on the Facebook page. We also have an Instagram, a Twitter, or an X account. And is that it, Dave? Do we have any others? So I think those, and we do have a couple. So we've got the Public Works, the city. We do have a Parks and Rec page that we basically just use to say when activities are and when signups are. But one of the concerns was that a comment, even a private message between an employee and a resident is seen as coming as the official thing from the city. And that might not be the official position of the council. The hard part is, as you all know, unless there's 3 of you saying yes to it, it's technically not the official position of the city. And so we've kind of relied on the PIO to do that, but it's open for how the council would like to do that. One of the options that is a pretty good option is to, or that's a good option to consider. You can do obviously anything you want, but to maybe just on Facebook and some of those accounts, we just have an automated response that says, look, this is, if you ask us a direct question through a direct message, you really need to be sending that to the council to get a response, because oftentimes it's a policy question that the staff doesn't have the ability to answer. But there are some things that obviously we can answer, like when does the pool open? When is the city open? And so there's a little bit of a fine line there where we may still want to give people the ability to answer those questions, or at least point people in the right direction to get those answers. But this is kind of the open discussion area of tonight's conversation.
John, I think we had a conversation that, our Facebook page ought to be used for informational purposes. Frankly, most of the posts on social media aren't questions. It just generates the thing that we need to respond to, an accusation or something of that nature. Direct messaging, may take place. And I think in that case, it does make sense to refer them to send an email to the council member. But I think social media is informational. It's not a place to be responding. People have a serious concern I think from my perspective, council members have been good in responding to those appropriately. I know we've had a discussion, Councilmember Swanson was good at getting information out there. I think it's important to get information out there, but to John's point, when people make a comment or a response and you're a council member, I think that is the position of the city. And I think so we just have to be careful in that regard. And I think we can solve that by using Facebook as response. I mean, social media as informational. That's not where we answer accusations or questions. That comes through because I think we've spent a lot of time trying to get people to go to the North Ogden page to get their information, not other pages out there. And I think it's important that we continue to try to get people to go to the North Ogden page to get their information. So just something for consideration, but I do like the idea that if somebody does a direct message on social media that it comes to the city council in the form of a response. Then I think as council members, I've just advised you can do whatever you want, but when you respond, you probably gotta make sure that that's the position of your fellow council members. You could find yourself in kind of a very embarrassing and awkward situation. Councilmember Pulver, did you want to make a comment?
Just not a thought, but more of a conversational piece on that is that I agree that once you're a council person, you have you watch what you say. And I guess there's a lot of trolls out there that are basically trying to get you to say something. And I think if you have a standard reply, at least in that regard, as long as it's not, if it's like like you said, when does the leaf truck come by? Then I think that's a pretty easy thing that you can say, but yeah, but if it's something policy related or why aren't you doing your job or something like that, I think it's, the one email address that you reply to and say, hey, if this is really a concern, here's the email address, please tell us exactly what you want or what's your concern. And I think that should be a standard for anybody that wants to reply on social media, period. I think Nextdoor was another one. I was another outlet too. But.
The key is that we do respond to citizens when they have a question that comes through the city council email. And I think we just need to make sure that we have that covered because there's nothing more frustrating than having a question and not getting an answer. Councilmember Watson.
So I like what you're saying, and I agree that people want to have an answer. Sometimes on social media, it may be tricky to know whether or not it's a question or an accusation. And either way, maybe the resident required or expects an answer. And so I think my opinion is that there would be some protection offered if one of us is tagged in particular with some kind of accusation or question that couldn't be answered, that we had some kind of automated pre-written sentence that just said, if it's not informational, here's who is it PIO is who you could ask or come to city council.
I think we could distinguish an accusation from a question, or because if they're seriously wanting an answer, they will email the council. If they're just making an accusation, they probably won't email the council. So hopefully that would be a distinguishing factor, but we'll see. Any other questions for consideration for the council to digest on the media?
One thing is if you are considering that maybe we should adopt this policy and incorporate it, just know that there are some pretty stringent requirements on how the council interacts if they're reached out to by the media and also the PIO. So like I said, we didn't anticipate this would be approved tonight. So let's dig into that because that was the biggest objection to it the first time around was someone said, well, if someone calls me to ask, about, the flooding in the city, I want to be able to respond without getting their answers, writing them down and sending it to the entire council at the same time I respond to the news person, and that the idea is that as long as the council's making it really clear, I'm not responding on behalf of the city, I'm responding as a council member, that was kind of the thought, and they just scrubbed it at the time and just said, well, if one person says no, then we don't want to force that person to follow something they don't want to, on the council type of approach.
New council members, do you know who the public information officer is? It's John. It's historically been the mayor, but the mayor's not into politics, so he asked John to.
How much do you want to take on here?
But I think, when possible, we should refer to the public information officer. There's occasion when not, that ought to be the exception versus the norm. And old Councilmember Barker, he likes to be on TV a lot. So,
I look for a reason to make John be on TV.
what else, John, on this, or what questions does the council have? Councilmember Fuller?
I just think it's a good thing because I look for direction on that. That's kind of the one thing that I know for the companies I've worked for the Air Force, all that stuff. You had a specific person that you went to that had the knowledge so that you didn't have 17 different versions of what happened. So, they do that with the police department as well. So they usually anoint somebody to go talk to the media for whatever issue came up. So I'm in favor of getting something on the books.
Okay, thank you. Any other feedback for John or comments? Probably don't want to cut the discussion short, so if you have any other comments. Okay, I don't see any other comments. This is an agenda item. It's related to resolution 01-2024. So that being the case, unless you want to address it this evening, we need a motion to postpone the future meeting. Whoever makes the motion, if they'd like to put a date on that, or they'd like to address it, that's fine. So do we have a motion to postpone?
Motion to postpone resolution 01-2024 to a future date. As soon as possible, 2023 January, I think was the next one.
Okay. Because as John mentioned, this has been a discussion that's been out there for quite some time, probably good to resolve it, so. Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Pulver. Do we have a second to his motion?
A second.
Thank you, Councilmember Severing. Is there any further discussion? That being the case, then all in favor of postponing the discussion regarding resolution 01-2024, please say aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed to that motion? The motion would pass unanimously. Okay, we'll move on then to item number 6 on our agenda. I know that many of these are new assignments for council members, so we'll give it our best shot tonight. We'll start with Councilmember Severing, see if he has anything of substance he'd like to report to the council and citizens regarding building and plan.
Scott has done a great job updating me today on some information. Excuse me, revenues revenues collected so far this year or through this from up to this point of our budget year are under Village of Prominent Point apartments pulled permits, which reduced our Q2 revenues. All building reviews are currently all up to date. Building inspections are caught up. And so far in 2024, in the last 9 days, we've received 10 permits for house building, for houses to be built in the area. So, and then Scott also wanted me to mention just a couple of things with planning department. The state legislature kicks off next week. He encourages both the mayor and the council and others to tune into the ULCT Legislative Policy Committee meetings. Monday.
Thank you for that report. Okay, we'll move on now to see if the council member Dalpass would like to report on what's going on in our Post Axel Police Department.
Yes, for sure. I have several items. Most importantly, today is National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. We are so grateful for our awesome police officers and our awesome department. And so if you get a chance after the meeting, please talk to our officer and congratulate them and thank them for their service. Yeah, I'm sure Officer Lopez wants all of that attention. Also, we have Chief Quiddy has been invited to participate in a forum that will be hosted by the Weber County League of Women Voters and the NAACP Ogden branch. That will be tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Basically, this forum will discuss such matters as, city crime rates, gun violence, statistics about Weber County, how the public can help, current challenges, and they'll be taking questions. So that should be a very interesting forum and should be a good opportunity to ask our local police chiefs any questions that we have. Chief Quinney provided me with a few updates. One of those is that we have the Weber County Area Citizens Police Academy that is starting up on March 8th. So the commitment for that is one night a week for 7 weeks. The North Ogden Police Department teaches the TASER portion of the academy, which is interesting. If citizens are interested in attending, they can get more information by calling the police department. Otherwise, it is time to license dogs for 2024. So renewals can be done over the phone. New licenses will need to be done in person. Please ensure that your pet gets back to you safely if it ever wanders away from home. That's the whole purpose. And then last but not least, we had a conversation about this tonight. Just a reminder that winter parking restrictions are currently in effect. There is no parking on streets between 12 a.m. and 6 a.m. or during 24 hours following a snowstorm. Thank you.
Councilmember Dalpass, don't want to put you on the spot, but any update on the public safety building, or you can defer to John on that if you like.
Well, I haven't asked John in the last week, and the last he was saying was kind of end of January-ish. So I'm going to defer to John.
So still end of January-ish. We do have some of our furniture started showing up, yet to be put together, in part because the carpet isn't all down. But we are scheduled to do our punch list, which is where we go through and say, here's a hole in the wall, there shouldn't be any big holes in the walls, but here's all the things we need fixed. And that'll happen on the 22nd, which means we should, prior to that time, have what we call our occupancy permit, which doesn't mean everything's done. It just means the mechanical life safety stuff is there, and it's a safer environment and has checked the boxes for the building code, but not for the aesthetic code that the city staff has. So that's it. And there's a Lions effort going on with staff members to help get this across the finish line. The contractor's doing a lot, but you can't say enough about Nate and Bryce and everyone who is just pitching in to make that building come together. So, and Ken, I should mention Ken Young too. He helped do a ton, and I shouldn't. I feel like it's the Oscars. All the people, they have been over there doing things, going above and beyond, and it's been fantastic.
Including Mr. Connell. Is that not true?
I have helped paint a little, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Barker.
Yep.
Parks.
Yes, we're finishing up or working on 2 ramp grants for the playground and the North Shore Pool and a trail connection on Mountain Road. Just a reminder that our parks people actually help with snow removal and help plow cul-de-sacs and then do the sidewalks and parks and trails.
Councilmember Dalpass, could I just ask you also to give a brief update on the Barker Park committee? when that'll be meeting, with that assignment to try to get a plan that can come back to the council on a phased approach.
Yes.
We have a meeting.
If I remember correctly, our first Barker Park Committee meeting is going to be held on Wednesday, January 24th at 6 p.m. Ryan, please double check me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's the case.
Yes.
And so I will send a text message to all of the committee members just to make sure it's very clear that that's when we are starting to meet.
Thank you. Appreciate you taking that assignment. Anything else? Okay, we'll go to item number 7 this evening, which is public comments. I think 2 things. If there are further public comments, I'd invite you to come up to the podium, state your name, and if you're a resident of North Ogden. And then there's some questions I think that have been asked previously we need to answer. So.
Give me a time when 3 minutes is. I have some empathy for the situation there, even though I have not personally observed it. So I'm going to ask, would there be anything wrong with, since this next meeting is 2 weeks away and it'll probably snow sometime between now and the next 2 weeks, would there be anything wrong with taking the following action? May I suggest that during the time when on-street parking is currently not allowed, as Councilman Deltas reminded us, during that time period, that there be a cooperative gentleman's agreement to allow parking for this particular business only with a sticker that could be generated quickly on the south side only for a defined distance from the corner and for a defined total length, not a number of cars, but a distance, with the understanding that Big O will move all the cars on that, within that allowed distance, within 1 hour of when the north side of the street is plowed. Move all the cars over to the north side of the street, and then Big O with the little plow that was mentioned, that somebody said they were doing a meticulous job of plowing the sidewalk, you know, keeping clean. That then Big O, in exchange, would then complete the plowing of the south side of the street during that, for that distance, so that the cars are moved, the street gets plowed, you have some allowance, and your side of the deal is that you get the street plowed after you move the cars, and then the cars move back to the south side of the street, all within 1 hour of when the north side of the street got plowed. And I would really like to see something, some gentleman's agreement like that come up with now, rather than wait for 2 weeks after we've had more snow and the problem persists. So that is my suggestion. Is there any reason we could not have some sort of an agreement tonight that would help them now?
I'll turn to John, but I think what you're requesting is a variance. And I think there's a process you have to go through for a variance, isn't there, John? That's that.
Yeah, the better way would be to pass something tonight that would allow it, that would sunset in 2 weeks, if that was the thing, so that, because we need to follow the ordinance, you know, because at least the staff does. We need to do it. The council puts down an ordinance.
Well, I think we have ordinances for a reason. We start making exceptions to those. It gets us on a fairly slippery slope. One other thing, Doug, is I believe there's a law against citizens plowing public streets. So that would be prohibited also, because there's damage that can take place to the streets, and there's certain requirements. What I would suggest, since this is an open thing for discussion, is that Big O make sure those cars are removed as they see the plow come by and do the other side of the street, so that the council knows they're serious about considering this further, and in hopes that they get those done before they show up. I think maybe that's the best we can do tonight. you just start making exceptions to ordinances, but that's surely a council decision.
I just know that the snowplows have certain people do certain routes. And if that lead person has the number for Big O and says, hey, I'm 10 minutes out from your location, I mean, something simple like that would be something that Dave could relay, but I mean, that would get you through to that, so.
Yeah, I think the sentiment is some type of coordination. And I think that's something that probably could be worked out between the business owner and Public Works. Kind of mandating that, setting the rules might be a little bit tough for the council tonight, but thank you for your comment. Councilmember Dalpaz, did I see you want to make a comment?
No.
Okay. Anyone else? But it's a little bit more complex, Doug, than it seems on the surface because it entails several ordinances that would be violated. Thank you for your comments. Before we start answering the questions, is there anyone else that would like to comment? You're welcome to come up now or Dr. Shoup or.
Brenda Ashdown, I live in North Ogden. You know, I have an opinion on this. First thing, something that I've noticed. First off, I want to say this is just my opinion, and please don't anybody take offense by it. The first thing I have noticed tonight, everything you did tonight, you postponed. You do that very often, and then those things don't get brought back. Like there's a couple of things tonight that I think the last one that John was talking about was we discussed this for a long time and haven't made any decisions. You know, it doesn't personally affect me, but I think if I was personally affected, it would be bothersome. I bring something to you. I'll use Big O. They came here a month ago and asked for stuff. Then it was put on the agenda tonight and you guys postponed it. Why couldn't you have done your homework and research in the last month and been able to have an answer for them tonight? I don't want an answer to that question. That's just my opinion. The other thing is, I know that you don't have to allow public opinion in meetings. And I really, truly appreciate that you're willing to do that because this is my city as well, not just yours. And I think to reduce it to 3 minutes, I don't like that because I think sometimes it's very difficult to express your concern and having to do it very fast and then you guys aren't going to understand what we're feeling. And part of the reason I feel that way is because, and I brought this up before, I have sent emails and not got a response. So if you're not going to have public opinions or public comments, then you guys got to do a better job responding to the emails. I think that was it. Thank you.
Sandy Cochran, North Ogden. I have two issues I want to discuss. The first one is I'm wondering if when you're approving developers' plans for, we can use my community as an example, Prominence Point. I'm wondering if when they submit the plans, if you all look at it and say, when we have a snow year like we did last year, where's all that snow going? Because we have very little room for just residents to put. Townhome owners have to plow their own driveways. We have about this much space in between driveways. Luckily, I live at the end of the building, so I've got a grassy area. But everyone else, as little snow as we've had already, those piles are like this. And so Sunday, the snow removal company was out there and they had shoved a 5-foot pile of snow onto the sidewalk at the end of my driveway. And you all know me, I couldn't help it. I walked out in the street, I flagged his butt down and I said, get over here and move that. I'm 60 some years old. I'm sure as hell not doing it myself. And he said, I'm sorry, we shouldn't have done that, but, you know, we don't know where all this snow is gonna go. And I said, well, what are you gonna do when there's 470 some apartments up there? And he said, oh, there's no way. So I'm wondering, I mean, and this is his business. If he says there's nowhere for the snow to go, he tried shoving it over to the other side of 1700. He said that owner came out and chewed his butt out, and so that's not an option anymore. But I'm wondering, where is that part of the discussion when these developments are approved? And then my other issue is public comments. I think it should stay 5 minutes. I've been to lots of council meetings. We've never been here till midnight, at least I haven't. And if you've got a packed room, passions are running high. Maybe you need to hear what every single person here has to say. And I don't usually use my whole 5 minutes, but sometimes I have. And when I have, it's when I've got it all written out in front of me and I'm speeding through to make sure I get everything said. So my thoughts are leave it at 5 minutes.
Thank you. Dr. Shu?
Again, my name is Dave Shoup. I live in Liberty. While sitting there, I came up with some more plausible solutions to the sidewalk issue that I addressed earlier. One other additional solution is take the sidewalk out. If I don't want to plow it, or if it's too much of a burden that North Ogden City has cast upon me, then remove it, take it out, put it on the other side of the street where the park is, and then the Parks Committee can plow and do the walk. It's an option. Provide a gap between the sidewalk and the property, such as there is no longer an abutment. There's no definition as to how far an abutment is in your code. Is that an inch? Is that a millimeter? Is that a micrometer? How big of a distance is there before that's considered an abutment or not? It's unclear in your code. Change the code. Remove the term abutment out of there. Another option. If plowing the walk is really a public benefit, well, then let's open it up to the public. Let's put up a volunteer list to have the public volunteer to come and plow that section of walkway that does benefit the public. It's a public right of way. So let's make the public responsible. Don't put all of that burden on one individual as it is now. I really do want to be in compliance with your law. And I feel that the law has changed, or my situation has changed because of what North Ogden City has done. The last couple things that I might address is that as you look up and down along Washington Boulevard from 2850, which is up by the church, all the way down to Pleasant View Drive, the only sidewalk that exists on the west side of that road is mine. And that's because you required me to put it in as we were developing our property. So we complied, we put the sidewalk in, but there is nobody else from my place of business. If you want to pull it up on the map for us, I could illustrate that for you. Do I have a minute to show? This is my business here. We now have an existing sidewalk that goes along Washington Boulevard. This is new sidewalk all the way along to here that didn't exist before North Ogden City made that change. So now I'm required to plow all along here. And I would suggest, is anyone else in North Ogden City, if you pace that off, is my corner bigger than anybody else's corner? And is that even really a deciding point? You know, because I own the property, you're requiring me to do it, but I own more property and you put in a long sidewalk that now you're requiring me to keep clean. It's not fair. It's not fair. Where's my agency in this decision? Eric, the engineer for North Ogden City, never came to me and said, hey, if we put a sidewalk in, you better be aware that you're gonna have to clean it and maintain that. That was never discussed. If it were, then I would have made this argument then to say, put it on the other side of the street. I don't wanna have to deal with this. Seems, oh, the other thing on the map. Can you pull it up one more time? I'll try to be quick. We're getting close. Perfect. So the sidewalk exists from here up to my driveway, but from here, keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going, all the way to the church. From here, 2850 or Alberta Drive, nobody on that side of the side or that side of the street has a sidewalk. It's only me.
Okay. Mr. Shoup, just want to make sure we answer all of your questions. I think many of those are legal, so I'm going to refer to John on the city's right to put in sidewalks, the requirement. I mean, I think I've got, I don't know how long that is, but I think the sidewalk in front of my house is 130 feet. It's hard to clear that. I think there's an ordinance that addresses that. I want to make sure that Mr. Shoup's questions are at least addressed. If not, that we get with him. But do you want to address the ordinance, the easement, the right of way, and why that's?
So the sidewalk was installed because our engineering standards require sidewalk. And this was a safety consideration. It's a little bit unique situation, the way the property was developed. I can't remember, when it was all built. We didn't do a subdivision at the time, which didn't trigger the installation of the sidewalk. But had the city not installed it as part of our 450 East or 450 East project, when the subdivision was amended recently that triggered the sidewalk in front of the building, it would have also triggered the sidewalk on the south end, but because the city had installed it at our expense, it wasn't required. My understanding is that the ordinance to clear the sidewalk has been in place since 1987, or at least was most recently amended in 2006. It is the same ordinance we impose on all the residents. And I think the philosophy the city has used is technically the roads and streets are owned by all the residents because they're public streets. They're there for the benefit of others or for everyone. And so we ask the residents, or the council in the code has required the residents to clear the sidewalk because the effort it would take to do it all ourselves would require a substantial amount of seasonal employees in the wintertime going around shoveling every sidewalk in the city. And so that's why we've done that. The question related to liability, I am not aware of a case that gives enough specifics because every situation is pretty different. But usually the way the rule works is the cities are required to have a snow removal plan, which in our case, we do impose that burden on the neighboring property owners. And we are liable if we don't enforce that burden, meaning that there's a risk to the city of liability if someone slips and fall. And the liability goes down if it's plowed and if it's maintained for everyone involved. I'm not aware of a situation where a city's been sued for a slip and fall on ice and the neighboring property owner where the neighboring property owner has been found to be liable. Usually that's that burden and the lawsuit always kind of come around to the city being the one who ends up in the battle. But that doesn't mean that people who slip and fall won't sue the neighboring landowner. I'm just not aware of a case where a court has said in Utah that the neighboring landowner was liable.
I remember when I was in college in business law class, that question was answered and the instructor said, if you haven't plowed your sidewalk or cleaned it, somebody falls and slips, here's what you do. You drag them to the neighboring property because you're liable.
Yeah, if you plow it, then your risk goes down substantially.
Why, an answer to Mr. Shoup's question, What gives the city the right to put that there? And, was there an easement there? And
So the sidewalk is on the city right of way. It's ground that we've owned that's been next to the property there. I don't know when it was first subdivided, but back, understanding that this property hasn't been subdivided, it's on the old meets and bounds and lots and plots. But the city has owned that right of way, and so we were able to put the sidewalk in the existing city right of way. And before that, there had been grass there that had been maintained by the Coldwater Animal Hospital prior to that, which is another requirement of the code, that people mow the park strip in the area between the asphalt and their property. Again, it's kind of that abutting property rule that the council has imposed, again, because we can't mow every piece of ground that the city has.
so to summarize this, and then see if the council has any questions. Unless there's a change in the ordinance, Mr. Shoup is required by current city ordinance to keep that there. And I believe his question on the sidewalk only on his property, it's because of the improvements that were made there. That's the problem we've got in the city, is for years and years, there was not a requirement to put sidewalks in. So now we have partial sidewalks and we don't have sidewalks. But I believe under the new ordinance, any subdivision approval requires sidewalk. Is that correct?
That's correct. And the sidewalk that heads north, you normally would have been put entirely on city property. That's our requirement. But because there's a power pole there and some other things, the planning commission felt it was appropriate to let them move that sidewalk a little further west with an easement for public use of that sidewalk, because the cost to move that power pole would have been very expensive. It's a very big power pole with a lot of power, like volts running through it. So the decision was by the planning commission, hey, let's do this modification to make it a little bit easier and cheaper.
I understand Mr. Shoup's concern, because clearing 130 feet of sidewalk with all the things from the street on there, I'm still reeling from that one. But I think all of us are subject to that ordinance. So I would say, Mr. Shoup, until the ordinance is changed, if you'd like to petition the council to look at that, you're more than happy to do that. But in the meantime, I think it would be probably in your best interest in the cities to keep that clean until the ordinance is changed, if ever. Was there any other questions? I'll give you another 30 seconds.
Prior to coming to this meeting, I drove around.
Step up here to the podium, please.
Perfect. Prior to coming to this meeting, I drove around North Ogden. 6 homes on the west side of the street haven't plowed their walk. North Ogden City went to great expense to put a sidewalk in all the way up and down along the west side of the street, but you're not maintaining that. And I can't name names. I don't know who filed the complaint against me, but 7-Eleven isn't done. McDonald's isn't done. I just feel like I'm being picked on by whoever, and maybe I deserve to be picked on. I'm a little bit crotchety. My experience with North Ogden City has not been good.
Well, let's see if we can improve that, but I would say we've got the police chief here who, under his direction, is community services. And everyone should be subject to the same requirements. So you pointed out some non-compliance, and I'm sure that I know the chief will get with his community service officers and let them know that we have non-compliance.
Yeah, and yourself, North Ogden City, in front of Pleasant View, the old shops, is not done. It's not plowed. Here you are shaking the stick at me, hey, do it, but you haven't done it yourself. Take care of your own business before you come pounding me, is what I'm thinking.
Well, we'll try to take care of everybody's, so it's pretty massive. All right, does anyone else like to make a comment, or John, do we have anyone online? If so, please step up to the podium and state your name and your residence.
Harold Sunderland, North Ogden City resident. I had 2 items. As I've listened tonight, the first one is, abstinence from voting, abstaining from voting. Interesting conversation council had. To me, it's simple. If you abstain from voting, that's all it should mean. Should mean a no, should mean a yes. I don't know, apparently it's been going back and forth. So my comment is abstaining means you did not vote. And as Mayor mentioned, if that's a duty of the city council to vote, and they like to abstain, interesting point. Second item. On the rule for plowing in the winter and the rule for not having anything parking on the curb overnight or in the region of or 24 hours of the storm. I certainly agree with Phil Swanson. Don't do that. Don't change it. It got quite complicated this evening as you considered options to take into account Big O. What I also just observed is all the effort tonight to consider Big O. Am I saying that right? It is Big O, right? To consider Big O's predicament. You then just told another business that they're just gonna have to follow the rules. I just watched that. It was kind of interesting to observe that. In the one side, what can we do to help Big O? On the other, just do what the ordinance says. So, yeah, I agree with Phil Swanson. Don't change the ordinance. Thank you.
Once again, I'm Jason Westbrook. This is my business partner, Jared Sewell. We both own Big O Tires. It's kind of difference between keeping your sidewalk clear and having a place to park. And as Scott mentioned, our original plan submitted to North Ogden City had 8 additional parking stalls in it on the east side, but it put us too close to Washington. The North Ogden's easement is 20 feet from the property line. That put us at 7.8 feet, so it encroached in. So we couldn't do that. Right now, the green space requirement is 4,000 square feet. We have over 9,600 square feet, and we've tried drawing out different ways of where we can add parking, what we can do. But it's because of, we've already been rejected on that from previous planning. At that, adding 8, 9 parking stalls there would help us a little bit, but it's not gonna completely help us. The comment earlier about parking on the south side. The south side honestly is all residential. I mean, we have maybe 2 to 3 vehicles that we can park there. Most of our vehicles do go on the north side of the road. Like I said before, I mean, I know this isn't something to be, for the past 23 years, we have parked on that road without incident. We have always made sure that everything's gone through. The first time that we even had a police officer approach us about not parking out there was on December 12th, when it was a it wasn't sticking at all. They came in and told us that we have to move within the storm and 24 consecutive. Well, the hard part is even the weathermen can't predict storms. You know, they get paid to predict storms, and how many times do they write? You know, so we can't really predict if it is something to where we can work with the city and maybe, you know, I work with the city all the time. They, you know, we're doing recycling tires for you guys that you guys bring down to us when you do your spring cleanup. We go through and we do that and we do what we can to help. But if we can ask for the same consideration and maybe if we can get a heads up and say, hey, they're gonna run down the street in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and we can move the vehicles. If we can get something along that lines worked out, that would be great. I mean, I know it's kind of hard asking for that, but we are out of places. We've been trying to find somewhere to park for years.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
Why don't any of your employees park on Washington Boulevard? Because I don't think UDOT has that rule.
I didn't know if they did or not.
I don't believe they did. So
I
along
think you're
Washington,
right.
along Washington Boulevard instead of 1900.
We have had some customers park along there at times. It feels a little more busy, a little more unsafe, I guess, so it feels more safe on 1900. There's not so much traffic, but we could maybe look at that.
I mean, that's an alternative, and I would just suggest to Mr. Sunderland, sorry, is we did not change the ordinance. We told them they had to abide by that ordinance. So I don't think we were selective in those two individuals. We told them if they want to work something out, but they take the chance of the police coming by. So we haven't changed that ordinance. But Chief, did you want to step up here and make a comment? So we don't get off discussion.
Before we give somebody bad information, maybe John can help me out on this, but even city ordinances apply to UDOT roads. City ordinances apply to UDOT roads within our jurisdiction.
Because I think it was John who maybe suggested that was an alternative.
Yeah, we talked about changing that as an alternative for the code that people could park on Washington, because that's a defined road. And UDOT they don't push the snow to the curb if there's cars there. If you ever went to Weber State, you would see that if you parked out on Harrison.
So, thank you for that information. So that would require an ordinance change to all parking on state roads if they want.
Yeah.
Well, and we have, like I says, with us parking out on the street, I mean, even last year with the snow that we had last year, we really didn't even see a plow come down the road during the day. I mean, I can understand we need I don't know if it's something that we could coordinate, but I mean, I know I'm asking a lot there. I would love to have more land, but we've tried everything in our power to buy every piece of land that we could, and we cannot. Just for an idea, we have 27 employees, and at any time I have 18 to 22 people there parking. And so I have a total of 30 parking stalls. If I have 22 parking stalls taken by employees, that leaves me with eight stalls for customers. And so, as Christina had said earlier about, you wouldn't want your car out on the road. We have made sure that we will not put a customer's car out on the road if it is an employee's car. Because if something does happen, I can take care of that. I don't want to have something happen to a customer's car, but if it is an employee's car, if something happens to it, it's totally in
Well,
there.
really, let me restate my question. Because UDOT doesn't have an ordinance, would you like the city to consider changing the ordinance so you can park on state roads? Because that would apply to everybody. You don't want to have your people parking on Washington Boulevard, then there's probably no use for the council considering that as an option.
If that is our only option, I would say yes, but I would prefer to stay on 1900.
Understood.
We've even we've talked about, talking and seeing if we can work something out with the King's Plaza to where we park over there. But then I run into the issue of getting my people across the road safely.
Correct. I think we're probably.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Anything else? John, anyone online?
I do have a hand raised online. We've got Bryce Nelson. See if he,
That was a mistake.
oh, it was a mistake? Okay. So,
Which is comment, one of the things was mentioned, follow-up. I think Councilmember Pulver has emphasized the need to have a kind of a list of things we promised to follow up on, so we don't lose track of that. And I think John and Ryan have been working on that for a couple of weeks anyway, so. Okay, no comments then, we'll move on.
oh, hand just popped up.
Okay,
We have Susan Kilborn.
okay, let's hear from Susan.
Now, no laughing, you guys. You know I had to pipe in. I have a question for John. John, can you tell me how many people are in-house present for tonight's council meeting? And also, I think you are the one that's aware of how many people are watching out here. Can you tell me that?
There's 15 out there, John, and there was 16 till Dr. Sheep left.
So 16 in the room, and then there's 2 on Zoom. On YouTube, it's a little harder. We have 6 people watching right now. I think it says that on the YouTube feed.
Okay. And what's the population of North Ogden City?
Over 22,000.
So somewhere between the city and the citizens of North Ogden, I think on both sides, the ball has been dropped. There have been some really important conversations and discussions held tonight that I think so many people in our city would benefit from. And it just pains me that are not more people involved. And Chris Pulver, I'm going to pick on you because you're new. And I think you and I, if you would be willing, and you don't have to tell me in front of everybody if you don't work with me, but I think you'd be missing a great opportunity because I'm cool.
Yes, remember?
I want to find a way to get more people involved. I think if people are involved and know what the city council is talking about and planning, that there wouldn't be so many follow-up problems and cleanup after and trying to pacify everybody. I don't know. Tell me if I'm wrong. Go ahead, anybody. I dare you. Christina?
I think you're right. I would love to see more people coming. I am working on getting a youth council set up and, well, I guess it's already been set up, but roping in more people, and I'm inviting them to the meeting. So I'm trying to do my part.
All right. Well, I would like to see more involvement from the community. And, you know, I'm kind of the queen of social media out there. I have a lot of friends and a lot of them are in North Ogden. So I'm looking for somebody to work with so we can bring more people in. I know you guys might think, I don't want a bunch of people telling me what their ideas are, but I think everybody can benefit from it in the long run. So I'm just throwing that out there. And now I'm going to switch gears and be Susan Kilborn, your hippy dippy weather person. I want you to know when you leave there, there's very little to no snow. And the forecast is dark and continued dark with snow coming tomorrow. So I'm hoping everybody is safe. And I love our public works people because we live on a small cul-de-sac and they don't forget us. So everybody be safe tonight and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Susan. What else, John?
Nope.
Okay, then we will move past public comments. Let's start with staff. John?
We hit 2 of the items. The only one I have is the next week. We were planning on doing the work session that we skipped the first week. And the idea is that we will do a quick introduction of each department. kind of an orientation for everyone, and then spend a little bit of time talking about the 5-year capital projects plan. So this is the intro to the budget. And we hope to keep it shorter than tonight's meeting.
Thank you, John. And I've gone over, just for the council's information, I asked each council member to send me their priorities so that we could make sure those are incorporated. The budget is agreed upon by the council, so I've gone over those with John and Dave also. So those are being considered as part of the discussion when it comes to budgeting also. Anything else, John?
Nope.
Chief? Pete? Dave? Anyone? Scott? Okay, we'll move on then to council comments. Council, do you have anything you'd like to bring up, make comments on? Councilmember Pulver?
Just a reinforcement of the whole sidewalk, but the other side ancillary thing to that is when you're clearing your sidewalk, don't put it back in the street. That's been a big pet peeve, but it's just something that seems the opposite of smart, in my opinion, and talking with the plow guys, same thing. And they showed me some of the pictures of, weird things on the road, and it's almost hard not to hit them with a plow. So, it makes things really, and it's not legal to throw snow back in the roadway. Anyway, that's just a comment of mine. And then Phil kind of pointed me to the Citizens Police Academy, and I appreciate that because it was awesome. And yeah, that my ugly mug is on the Connection magazine, because one of the staffers from there, and it's a good article. If you haven't read it, read it. And then I think the biggest thing on sidewalk cleaning is that if you're a developer and you have a developer's protection strip, you don't even live there, but yet you're responsible for that sidewalk. That was actually a code enforcement thing that I sat through, and the judge said, "Yep, developer, you're in charge of it." So it wasn't even the resident that lived there that was in charge of it, it was the developer, because he had that little strip in between. So that's, judge says, yes, you have to clear it. So I don't know how we say not on that. But public safety is the key thing. And I think we were talking about that a lot, I think. And then for snow removal. And then with Susan Kilborn, yes, we were talking about how to get pushing involvement with the citizens. And I think we just need to chat more on that.
Okay, any other comments, council? Councilmember Severance, please.
Yeah, Mayor, I have a couple of things. Thank you. So I kind of wanted just to report on where we're at with All West Fiber.
Microphone, Mike.
Oh, sorry. So I was just curious to know where we got with All West Fiber this year. I haven't heard a report on that.
John?
So they are the ground or the main conduits, the trunk lines are through most of the city, although the northern end does not have as much installed. They are making connections at houses as the engineering team gets it approved. A good example is there's some houses near us, the city hall, that are installed, but city hall has not connected yet. And so as a private entity, we don't have any control about where they go, how fast they go. But we are working with them to do the permits they need and get through, but they have slowed down a little bit recently. And I think one person has it at their house live, but I know my neighbors and people in my neighborhood have it's almost live, meaning it's looped on the house, but they haven't turned it on yet. So,
I had some neighbors ask me about it, and I'm just crossing my fingers it comes to where I live, but just was curious. Thank you. And then the second thing, John, and I know I bring this up every time, and I'm not going to tire of bringing it up, but I would really like to have that prescriptive easement taken care of by about May 1st of this year with Coldwater.
Oh, yeah, he's
Access
talking
to the
about
trail.
Lewis Barker.
Oh, okay, Coldwater Canyon,
I'd
yeah.
like a date set and have it done by then.
Okay, we have made some inquiries with individuals who can meet with the landowners who have a connection there, so we can have some friendly faces in the room.
Okay, and then just one last thing, just for the public's information, Grant Protzman and Susan Clements have been doing an incredible job gathering hours for work that's been completed down at Bill Barker Park, and we will be submitting. How many hours, Susan, do we know how many we've actually will be submitting to the?
Hours?
They do know how many hours have been worked?
It's around 1,000 hours
Okay,
over the past 18 months.
so we will be submitting that ramp grant this year, so things are moving forward on Bill Barker Park.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Barker.
Just as my other role or in this uniform, the fire department's gonna be doing a strategic plan in the next month. So we'll be pushing out a lot of social media stuff. So if you want to get involved on what you want from the fire department, be watching. All of them. Then we'll push it out on our social media, and we're gonna try to work with all 3 cities to get it out to everyone as much as possible.
The other Saul, I've got a few things. We had a great event down at Barker Park, North Pole. And probably one of the times that's utilized the most. However, I've asked John to look at a couple things. One is the traffic flow. I attended one of those, and if we ever had an emergency, and I think I talked about this with Councilmember Barker, complete ignoring of parking on one side of the street during that event. And if I understood Councilmember Barker right, it creates a safety hazard for public safety if there was ever an emergency there. I think also we need to look at the fact that the traffic is horrendous because you've got people coming in for an event that ends about 5 minutes before. So I think we need to discuss whether we need some traffic control, but additionally, I think we have a policy that says if there's more than X number of people attending an event there, it requires police presence. So I've asked John to look at that. I've also asked John to clarify if that is a city-sponsored event, because there are ramifications that the council ought to understand, and it's surely up to them if they want to do that. I think it's a good event. We're not surely trying to diminish it, but I think we as a city need to make sure we're complying with our own ordinances, as has been brought up. So John will be giving us a report on that. John, I do have a question in regards to appointing the budget committee this evening. Can I do that without it being on the agenda, since it's
So they're technically a subcommittee, so
subcommittee? of the
it's
audit
not,
committee?
it's not required for the council to vote on them. So you can list the names as a mayor's committee under the audit committee.
Councilmember Pulver brought this up. I think it's a good idea. I don't want to bore to death people who've served on that committee and gone through the process of what I call the yellow sheets. But I do think for those committee members who would be new to that, them to understand the budget process would be good. I think the more of our citizens that understand that, the better. So we kind of have a dual goal, and that would be to help new members of that committee understand the process. Item number 2 would kind of be able to look strategically out and understand the budgeting for our 5-year capital plan and other strategies. So we're kind of dividing the committee up a little bit, I guess. For those members who have served previously on the committee, we will use them as consultants and invite them to the meetings where we're talking about the long-term situation. All other committee members will have that involved in the process from beginning to end. So the names of the committee are Kyle Nordfirst, I believe, Chris McIntyre, Brad Dee, Philip Swanson, and Christy Pack. That committee will be overseen by Councilmember Pulver. The other members that are kind of, I guess, for lack of a better term, ad hoc, would be Doug Anderson and Brenda, who served on the committee previously. And they'll be called upon when we get to the long range look. So just wanted the council to be aware of that, and committee members, citizens who would like to serve are always welcome. We always love to have citizens there. Additionally, on the LPC of the Utah League of Cities and Towns, we have 3 voting members. Councilmember Swanson used to be a voting member of that. He's no longer with us. The other 2 members are John Call and myself. I would suggest maybe, I don't know if anybody else has any interest, but I was thinking with Mr. Porter's work schedule, he would have maybe time to do that, but I'm open if anybody else is interested. Okay, I don't see anybody jumping out of their seat.
I'd be happy to help you.
Okay. I don't think we have to make that decision immediately, so I'll give that some consideration and make an appointment. Council's all right with that. Okay. That's all I believe I have. Anything else before I seek a motion to adjourn? Councilmember Watson. We have a motion to adjourn.
Does it need to be motion to adjourn?
Yeah, it's historical. Motion to adjourn is accepted. Meeting's adjourned.